One of the biggest challenges we had was in the very beginning to get the mortgage, to get financing, because we weren't anything. We were an abandoned property that we needed to fix. We were not living there. It was not a B&B. It was not a winery. It was not anything. So nobody knew how to classify us, and nobody knew if they wanted to lend us money.
We document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the Venue RX. I am so excited to have you here, and this is going to be a fun chat today.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm glad that we're talking. Obviously, like we said right before you got on, you visited the West Coast where I'm at, and got a little sick and came back, and really happy to have you on and hear about 48 Fields today. I have a question. Just starting right off the bat, what is your favorite part of venue ownership?
Oh my gosh, I would imagine, it's funny, couples or parents will ask me, well, what's the best part about owning a venue? And I always joke with them that I would imagine that the answer to that is a little bit like choosing your favorite child, because it varies greatly. It depends on the day. It depends on what I'm doing. Like, there's so many different parts of it. On one hand, I could say it's really fulfilling because I work for myself and I control my schedule and I'm doing something I always wanted to do. But then there's also the couples who are some of them are just so sweet and the most kind people. And you hear about the relationships and you just feel really honored to be chosen to be part of their special day and help them realize what their wedding is going to look like. And, there's just big things and little things. It's hard to say what my one favorite thing is.
You mentioned being chosen, and obviously we're going to get into your venue, 48 Fields. We're going to just talk about your process of venue ownership. But what do you think goes into a couple choosing you? Maybe outside of some of the obvious things like price. Everyone talks about price all the time. But what do you think is kind of the connection point between a couple, like you were mentioning, and a venue?
I mean, that's almost like $1 million question, because I think about that often, because that's kind of the key to sales. Like, if you can figure out what your couples are looking for and you can do that, then you'll get more sales and more couples. But yeah, I think there's many factors. I think price, capacity, those are some basic things, but it's also aesthetics. We live in an area, very saturated market, a lot of barns. We're in Loudoun County, which is in Virginia. It's about an hour west of Washington, D.C. And we're kind of like this destination for weddings. And it's equally very techy. We have a lot of data centers. I think half the internet runs through our county, but then there's still a lot of farms and really rural aspects. So we do have a lot of barns. And I always tell couples there's such a range. There's your very rustic, there's your very country barns that have the old wood walls that maybe they don't line up anymore, and it's hay bale seating and animals. And then on the opposite end of barns, we have places that have been built brand new in the last 4 or 5 years, specifically for weddings. They're big, over the top, all the bells and whistles, and there's nothing wrong with either one of those two, and there's everything in the middle. And so couples, that's why they go tour, right? They want to see what appeals to them. And so at the end of the day, your space is your space. You can control some things, but you're rustic, you're modern, you're a country club, you're a restaurant, a manor house, whatever you are, you're automatically going to attract and repel some people just by the very fact of what your space is. I think the personality that you show as an owner, how invested you feel in them, how welcome and understood the couple feels as they're coming in and talking with you. It's a big day. There's a lot of emotions behind it. And so I think they want to feel like they're going to be well taken care of too. So a lot of hard, well-defined things, but then there's kind of those soft skills components too that I think goes into it.
So I wanted, and later, so let's talk a little bit about the venue, but I wanted later to ask you about that soft skills component, because the question that has been just permeating my brain over the last couple months has been, what difference do those soft skills make? The personality, the face that they're seeing, maybe the initial point of contact. I mean, let's say you're using best practices, and let's say that your venue is what it is, right? We can't, unless we're going to do a major construction project or something like that, that's not going to change too much. But what real difference does the personality, the effort, the attention, the care they feel from either the owner or the operator, whoever's there, right? How much does that really play in a role? And I think, you're probably the perfect person to talk to just because of the experience you have. But take us back, give us a little origin story. Who are you and how did you get into the wedding industry?
I have been in the wedding industry for a while now. So we bought our venue back in 2013, but prior to that, I had done wedding photography for 10 years and really enjoyed weddings, really enjoyed photography. But as I got older, like the weight of the cameras just really was doing a number on my fingers. Like my body was just so sore the next day. And I really grew to hate editing images because I'm such a perfectionist and I would just get too much into it. So I could see the light, or I could see the tunnel was kind of closing on photography. I couldn't do that a whole lot longer, but really wanted to stay in weddings. And my husband at the time, he's still my husband, but at the time in his job, he was doing a lot of corporate events. And so I had this whole plan. I was going to convince him that we needed to put our backgrounds together and buy this venue. And I had this idea for a while. So as I was going around and doing photography, as a photographer, you go to all kinds of venues. And so I would see, good things, bad things, different styles, all just kind of mental notes. And, during dinner, I would sit down with the venue coordinator and the different vendors and just kind of play dumb and be like, oh my gosh, so like, how does this work? How do you do this? And just kind of getting some background information that way. And then it took a whole lot less convincing to get my husband on board and want to do this. We knew it would definitely be a long-term investment. The property we bought had been abandoned. It's a barn venue, so there were 3 barns, 2 houses on the property, and every single thing needed to be renovated. You could not come in and use anything because it had been abandoned and overgrown and just kind of fallen into ruin. So we have put a lot of love. This is our 10th year, and we are just finishing up what I hope is our last major renovation project on the last house. We don't live on property. We're about 15 minutes away. So it's close enough that we can go back and forth as we need, but I'm not so close living on the property that I don't get that separation that you probably need sometimes.
Yeah. And 10 years, being in business 10 years, I think you're in a very different place than a lot of the venue owners that we talk to who may have been in business 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I'm curious, in that process of renovating, did you kind of take one piece at a time? Did you set a master plan and say, hey, this is how we need to do this? How did you think about approaching such a massive undertaking where you had multiple buildings that needed to be renovated?
Yeah, it was definitely took a lot of thought process because at the time, everything seemed like a priority. We had to replace everything. New well, new electric, windows had been broken out, doors had been removed, like the very physical. So we take a step back. What do we need to do first? Well, we need to secure the building. Let's get windows and doors. We didn't have indoor plumbing. And of course you would think, oh, wow, plumbing, that's kind of a basic. We got to have bathrooms. But surprisingly, that was one of the very last projects we did just last year. Because I could get luxury restroom trailers. And no, that is not the ideal, but it solves a problem while I need something like new electrical systems. And it's a 2-story barn. We live in DC where it's very hot in the summer, cold in the winter. So we got some air conditioning and, heating systems in there. So our perspective was always what's the most priority or what's the most important that we don't have another solution for in the interim. So that's kind of how we looked at things. We started with the barn because once we got that up and running, we could start generating some revenue from that. When we bought this 10 years ago, both my husband and I were still working our 9-to-5 corporate jobs. And so that's kind of how it was funded. At the time, what we felt was we were maxed out on mortgages once we took the mortgage out on this, and we didn't want to go further into debt with renovation. So we did things in phases. We kind of planned out what we were going to do each year, how we were going to pay for it. Of course, once we started to do some events that, money went right back into the business. But it's been a long process. And yes, there are days when everything seems like a priority and you just don't know where to start, but one thing at a time.
When you say you funded it using the revenue that you were getting or the income that you were getting from your 9-to-5 jobs, was it kind of like, how did you go about the purchase? You said everything needed to be renovated. Were you looking for something that everything needed to be renovated, or did that property just kind of fall in your lap? What was that experience like?
No, not that at all. So when we got married, we looked at this place. It was an old manor house, 3 stories. The owner lived on the top, and then top 2 levels, and then they rented out the bottom and the gardens and all that. And we thought, well, that's a pretty sweet setup. Like, wouldn't that be cool? Live in this fancy house for free. That was our thinking at the time. So that's kind of what we started looking for. That thought had kind of stuck with us over the years. And then we quickly realized, ooh, that is not in our budget at all. Rundown fixer-upper, that's what's in our budget. So we went into it knowing that it would be, the first 2 or 3 years, we didn't have any events or income because it was all renovations and getting it fixed up. And honestly, it was some friends of ours who came to us. They're like, hey, how's that bar coming along? By the way, we're engaged. We want to get married at your place. And I was like, really? Have you seen it? And it's not ready. They're like, no, it's great. It'll be fine. And it was a small wedding. It was about 40 people and everything. It was fine. It worked. And so we just kind of snowballed from there. I think our first year we did 6 events. The second, and still renovating along the way. The second year, maybe we were up to like 20-ish. So it's grown every year. But we did things a little bit strategically too. So we would always block off like January, February, and into early March. One, because it's cold and freak snowstorms scare me. I can plow out our place, but I don't control the roads. So, I didn't want to take the risk of doing an event at that time. So we used that time to do our renovations because I don't want construction going on while you're trying to have, your celebrations. So we would block out some times throughout the year where we would just close off our calendar, and we know that we would do our big projects during those times. So we did that for several years.
When you were looking at properties, I know you said you first envisioned this one, maybe larger property that you couldn't afford at first. What was the search like? Like, were you searching for certain elements, searching for a location, searching for a certain look of the land, or how did you, because there are so many properties out there. Like, you could build, you could buy something existing. You chose to buy something that was existing that you need to fix up. So what kind of was the process that got you to that specific property?
We did consider building something, just getting a plot of land and building something. And I worked with this architect designer, and I said, here's what I want and what I think I need. And he put a design together, and it was going to be over $1 million just to do the build. And I said, nope, that's not going to be in our budget either. So as we were looking around, price was the big factor, and land size. We needed to have a certain number of acres to be able to do what we do. And there was also a lot of possibilities. Do we become a winery at some point? Do we become a bed and breakfast? So all these ideas, we wanted to find a property that kind of fit a lot of those boxes, depending on what road we decided to go down. So I mentioned I did wedding photography for 10 years, and I did that while I was still doing my 9-to-5 job. I was fortunate, I suppose, in the sense that any money I made from photography just kind of went into our savings account. We never really spent that. So that became our down payment when we bought the property. And then, like I said, we're both still working. So any extra money we had from that is what we used to fund the projects as we got going. So we found this property. It's 48 acres, which we had seen this property pretty early in our search. And it was still pretty out of our price range. And so we decided on another property. We actually met with the county. We started going down that whole road, and the county supervisor just shut it down before it even started. She was just totally against it, did not want traffic, did not want that going on in her part of the county. So we came back to this other, and so some issues had come up at that point. And I said, this other property that we had looked at originally kind of solves those problems that she had talked about. It's not in her district anymore. Now we're in a different part of the county who might be more accepting of us. And so this property, like I said, it had been so run down. A family had inherited it from parents who had passed away, and nobody wanted anything to do with it. So they just abandoned it, let it fall into ruin. So we ended up seeing it in March of whatever year that was, 2013. It had been for sale for 4 years. We came back, we did all of our due diligence. We put our first offer in August, and the 4 siblings did not come back with a counter offer until November because they could not agree on what purchase price, because their inheritance was all tied to it and they all had different percentages. So they were kind of arguing among themselves. We ended up getting it for half of the price that it originally listed at. So we ended up getting a really good deal on it in the end.
That's huge. So you probably had a little bit of wiggle room to be able to start some renovations at least. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think at that point, because it had been for sale for so long and they didn't want to fix it up, and honestly, I don't think there were any other people interested or taking a bite on this just because of the scope of everything that had to be done. So I think we were crazy enough to take it on and see what we could do with it.
That's an incredible story. I'm curious, fast forward us now 10 years. Where are you at now? What buildings are on the property? What does your property look like now?
So, of course, we have the barn, which is our flagship space. It's a 2-level barn. The levels are both very separate from each other. And each level is a little bit different. Downstairs is very white, bright. Upstairs has vaulted, warm wood ceilings with the original woodwork. The barn itself was very structurally sound, very state-of-the-art for its time. One of the barns was an old wood barn. It was kind of falling in on itself, so we did have to take that one down. There's a smaller barn that we turned into like a cocktail hour space. The main farmhouse dates back to 1910. We renovated that, and that is our getting ready space. So usually the women are upstairs, guys are downstairs, or one half of the wedding party upstairs, one half downstairs. And then the second house is what we were just finishing up. We've got to put some landscaping and finish the outside. And that will become a separate getting ready space. Some couples really don't want to see each other. They really want a lot of separation. So if each half of the wedding party wants to take one house, that's an option. I do want to set it up as an Airbnb, like honeymoon house, rent it the night of your wedding. There's a lot more hoops I have to jump through with our county to get set up in that. My husband's not quite on board with that part of it yet. He kind of is of the mindset, I want midnight to come and know that people are off the property and that the party's not going on until the wee hours of the morning. So we'll see where that part of it ends up. And we did start a winery. We did do that back in 2021. I think we got our winery license. So that's a whole new part of my brain that I just have to worry about and take care of. That's a lot of work. But it does give us the ability to sell to our customers. So wine, cider, champagne to our wedding couples. And then they can still bring in beer and liquor on their own. We can't sell that part of it.
Is that an easier process, like going and starting a winery or even a brewery? Because I imagine it's maybe similar. Is that a similar or an easier process than trying to apply for a liquor license?
Liquor license in our county, you have to have some kind of food component, I think, to it. So you have to be a restaurant, you have to be like a hotel or some, with my very preliminary knowledge that I looked into it. So to get a liquor license was a lot easier for us to go the winery route. But it is not a full liquor license. Like I said, we can't do beer or liquor, so we can't offer full bar. But we have brought in non-alcoholic beverages as well. So we do kind of partial bar. Sodas, water, ice, lemonade, tea, that kind of thing will come through our venue. So that's been, I'd say within the last year or two, that's been an additional profit center for us.
That's huge. Yeah, I've talked to venues in Texas and in different parts of the country. And depending on where you're at, it seems like it's easier depending on the ABC, like TABC, Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission, is a little easier maybe to deal with than ABC here, but harder to deal with than, other places. It could take a month or 2 months. Was the permitting process a long one for you?
Not really. Well, there's so many forms and papers and applications, and you have to do it at the federal level, and then you have to do it at the state, and then you have to do it at the county level. So there's a lot of different people who want to know what you're doing. But it was easier in some ways because of all the work that we had done with the venue side of it, had kind of already been done, and that laid the groundwork to go into the winery.
Makes sense. Is that because maybe in the process of getting that winery going, you would have had to re-examine or re-look at other parts of the property? Had you not done it already, it would have made it more complicated?
A little bit. And, like everything goes back to zoning in the end. So, we had already got our farm agricultural status. We had been doing some cut flower work that we were growing on site and doing like pick your own. That was a small scale, but it was enough to satisfy the needs of the county, and that brought in a little bit of income too. And of course, now that we've got apple trees planted, we're definitely a farm in the eyes of the county. So it's all it all goes back to zoning. What do they want you to do, and how do you have to accomplish it? Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Our county is, I mean, maybe it's like this everywhere, but to me, they seem pretty strict. You know, they will go down to specifying how many trees you need to have in your parking lot. I mean, it gets really specific.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any tips for someone, you know, who hears that they maybe would love to own a venue one day, but they're just like, oh my gosh, that sounds so difficult. Are there any ways that you've found in the 10 years that you've been in business doing this, that not workarounds, but maybe ways to make that easier, that process of dealing with the county easier?
I wish. I wish I knew. I mean, I know some of the players who work at the county now, so I know who to reach out to if I have questions. There's some disheartening things that come up, though. You know, we're the type of people, we want to do what's right. We want to play by your rules. We want to follow the rules. But then you see people who are like, well, wait, why? How are they getting away with that? And it's kind of like, ask forgiveness, not permission. But I feel like if I were to do that, I would instantly be caught and like, I don't know, and then we'd be shut down. So I don't want to do that. I definitely see there are people that take that approach. Yeah, and it's, you know, every case is probably different. Depends on what you want to do, you know, which departments, you know, does the health department have to get involved? Does the, you know, building, are you putting an addition on? Or because we had to do that at one point too. And so, you know, putting in a septic system was probably the biggest headache that we did. So every thing is its own challenge. Mm-hmm. And I will actually say this is going down a little bit different topic, but one of the biggest challenges we had was in the very beginning, to get the mortgage, to get financing, because we weren't anything. We were an abandoned property that we needed to fix. We were not living there. It was not a B&B. It was not a winery. It was not anything. So nobody knew how to classify us, and nobody knew if they wanted to lend us money. So we ended up finding like the local farm credit, because we were a farm. They were willing to take this on. So that's where we ended up getting our financing from.
That's huge. And it's interesting. You've touched on something that I think is a big part of our industry, which is, you know, unpermitted venues, or venues that are kind of operating under the radar in different ways. And it is tough, to your point, because it's like, once you start kind of opening that county and permitting, dare I say, can of worms, you need to start, it's like, okay, you need to get this one involved, and then this department, and then this. And it's almost like if you don't get caught, it's easier. But then also on the flip side of that, what is the risk? What is, you know, your exposure if you don't do something correctly, and you do get shut down? Now you've taken deposits, and in our industry specifically, you've taken deposits for people in the future. Like, that's really, you know, you could be facing even lawsuits from your couples.
Yeah. Then your problems are just compounded.
Yeah, pretty wild stuff here. I'm curious about the offerings and the packages that you put together for people who get married at 48 Fields. Are you more of an all-inclusive style venue? Are you more of a blank canvas venue? Could you just walk us through some of the things that people receive when they are considering getting married at your property?
Yeah, it's definitely been an evolution over the years. You know, going back to when we started, obviously we were still pretty rustic, so our price was very low because of that. And you know, in the very beginning, we did. I'm sorry.
Could you share low? Could you give us some context around that?
I think it was like $2,000.
Okay.
For 9 hours, I think is what we started with. But you had to bring in everything, down to tables and chairs. And we quickly learned that if we can get some money for tables and chairs, that's going to pay off quickly. In terms of the payback, we can raise our price. We can control what we have. We can make sure it looks nice. It's one less delivery vendor that has to come in and out of the day. We didn't have a getting ready space at that time because we had not done the house. So 9 hours was sufficient because they were getting ready off site. Once we had the house and they were getting ready on site, we increased to 12 hours so that they could have that getting ready time. I know there's venues out there that offer like 14, 15 hours. People can add on time if they need that much time, but it is a long day. So I don't want to offer that as a standard. We are now kind of just under 5 figures for our rental. We have taken a hybrid approach, so it's still 12 hours. We do for the day. we kind of made a decision early on that, we want to run the business the way we want to. We don't want to burn ourselves out. We know this is a really, can be a really intense industry. So we will do weddings typically on Fridays, Saturdays, or Sundays, but we don't like to do all three. Saturday is kind of a given. Somebody's going to book a Saturday. So if somebody books a Friday, I don't want to do a Sunday, and vice versa. There's a few weekends throughout the year that, Columbus Day weekend being a big one that, we will do a triple sometimes in the fall. It's not our favorite thing, but it's also hard to say no to people when they're ready to hand you money too. So,
and why Columbus Day weekend?
In our area, October is just the most popular time of year. It's right as the leaves are changing. The weather's really nice. So Columbus Day weekend in October is always the most in-demand weekend for us throughout the year.
Got it. So you're willing to say, okay, for that one time, maybe even time of year, definitely.
Yeah.
So keep going with what you get. When you book the venue, what are people booking now at this point, now that you've kind of graduated a little bit in pricing in terms of what you're including?
It is, like I said, it's still 12 hours for the day. We've got all of your tables and chairs. Linens come through us. Like I said, wine and non-alcoholic beverages come through us. So we approach things. We've got your hard cost, which is your venue rate. That's set. That's not going to change. And then we have your variable costs, the wine, the linens, and the non-alcoholic beverages, because that's going to depend on your guest count, how much wine you're picking, what bottles. So those we estimate in the beginning, kind of the minimum of what we think you might need based on your guest count. So our venue payment is broken up into thirds. And so those variable costs based on the estimate, we break those up into thirds too. And then 30 days before the wedding, we kind of settle up, okay, how many people are you having? What's your wine choices? And then we settle up if there's any overages or under for those variable costs. When it comes to vendors, we take a hybrid approach. Caterer and wedding coordinator do have to be chosen from our pre-approved list. We do require a wedding coordinator. It's pretty common in our area, and we've had that for a number of years now. So that's a really good decision for us. So those two have to come off of our list. And then any other vendor, DJ, photographer, florist, we have recommendations, but they can also choose their own. Everybody has to be licensed and insured. We have to get COIs from any vendor. We are not going to have your grandma make your cake. Your fraternity brother is not going to be your DJ. So we do have a kind of a minimum standard there for professional vendors. Those, they would source those all on their own. That is our most typical package. But with COVID, we came up with another offering. We do have an all-inclusive package, 8 hours. You getting ready is definitely off-site. And we will not book that on Saturday, and I will not book it more than a year in advance, typically. And it includes everything you need: catering, florist, DJ, photographer, cake, coordinator, all your major vendors. And it all goes through us. We have vendor partners that we work with. Some people like it because, they're busy professionals. They don't want to have to deal with researching the venue or the vendors. Other people like it because if they have shorter engagements, they know that they can, all of these vendors are already going to be available for them. And then some people like it because they can kind of see what their total cost is going to be before they get too far down into it. There's always a little bit of variation, but they kind of go into the planning with a pretty good ballpark number of what it's going to be. So that's been really interesting. We do, maybe 10, 12 of those a year. And it's just kind of some people are on a smaller, tighter budget. And so that helps them out a little bit too.
Probably to take some of the guesswork and the legwork for them out of the different vendors means that they get to spend more time working or doing whatever instead of turning into like a mini wedding planner or project manager, right? In the time being. I want to ask you a question. I've actually never asked this on the podcast before, but I'm curious for linens. When did you make the decision to bring linens in-house? How do you manage that? Because linens, tables and chairs, fairly straightforward. You buy them from the vendor, you store them somewhere on site, set them up, tear them down, clean them, repair them as needed. As far as linens go, they have to be washed every time. Are you using kind of an outsourced service for that? Do you have to replace them frequently? Walk me through that.
I don't want to be washing linens every weekend. I do know that for sure. It came about another local venue, and I had been talking, and she referred me to this company, and they've been great. So the problem that we were the problem behind this that made us want to bring linens in-house is, let's say your wedding is at 5 o'clock and the caterer is going to show up maybe 2 or 3 hours before that. So that's, 2, 3 o'clock. But your florist might have 3 other drop-offs that they need to do that day. So they're getting there at 11 and 12. And if the linens aren't set, then they literally sit around doing nothing and they can't put all the centerpieces out. The cake can't be set until the linen's on the cake table. And then we had some caterers show up and be like, oh yeah, we forgot what size tables you had. So rather than calling us, they just guessed, but they guessed, the wrong size. And so now the linens don't fit the tables. We've had caterers show up and be like, oh, look, the napkins didn't make it on the truck. Wonder what we're going to do. And so after all of these things, I was like, this ultimately is kind of looking bad on the venue, because as guests don't know if we provide them or not. They just know, oh, we're going to a wedding at 48 Fields. And is their experience good or bad for any vendor based on the one vendor that they might know? So we rent them out. We have a rental company that we work with. We usually get them about Tuesday or Wednesday of the week so we can check to make sure everything's there. We usually set the linens during the rehearsal, so the couple can kind of see the room set up if they've got the first wedding of the weekend. But then when the vendors come, it's ready to go. They don't have to wait around for it. We don't make a ton of money off of it, but it's kind of less headache, more peace of mind for us and the vendors too.
So then they do that same vendor then comes around and probably does a pickup afterwards, picks everything up. And if there's like candle wax, I'm just making stuff up, food droppings, oil, whatever, all of the things that go on the linens. And you're doing both napkins and tablecloths. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes. So far, I guess we've been very lucky. I mean, I know there's been linens that have had wax poured on them. We've not had surcharges. Maybe the linen company just knows this is part of, and there's been wine poured on, stains. So I'm sure that they know that's kind of their cost or, part of their business. Every once in a while, oh, you had 100 napkins, but our staff only counted 98 at the end of the night. Well, oh, did they miscount, or are we actually missing 2? If that becomes a habit or a pattern, we will get charged for it, but it happens so infrequently that we haven't had missing linen charges. So it's worked out pretty well for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's something I was asking as much for myself as anyone else with the 5 venues we manage here locally. It's always been like, oh, we don't want to be doing laundry, right, at 5 different places, but does it make sense to add it on for the price versus like someone wants their own different style. They want a cream colored one or a black linen or white, whatever. So we haven't done it so far, but it's been a topic of conversation for us. So we've kind of been working through.
Well, the other thing that's worked out nicely for us, obviously if you were going to do linens yourself and be cleaning and all that, you've also got to have a lot of storage space to put them all, which storage is always at a premium at a venue. You never have enough of, you probably know, you never have enough storage for what you need. But by working with this rental company, now we have dozens and dozens of colors. We've got different styles, patterns, textures. So there is a little bit of variety. 99% of our couples just go with the basic kind of solid and whatever color matches their color scheme. Every once in a while, there's somebody who wants something different. And if we can get it, great. If we can't get it, they have a very specific thing that we want. We'll let them do it. We'll say, okay, you don't have to get it through us in this case because we're not able to get you exactly what you want. We do want you to be happy and have the wedding and design that you want to have. That's probably only happened 2 or 3 times over the last several years. So it's, yeah. Makes
total sense to have them in-house. Where you said that you kind of walked us through, and I should have asked you before, but you walked us through, you did 6 your first year and about 20 your second year. Where I know venues typically kind of reach like a max capacity almost. Where are you at now? And are you still looking to kind of grow the number of weddings that you do per year? Or are you kind of just about at your max velocity or amount of weddings booked per year?
Yeah, that's a debate I have in my head quite often. I tell myself that we've been sold out every year for the past 3 or 4 years. But, then we had a year like 2022 where we had to do so many more because of the wedding boom, and we really pushed our team and we felt burned out by the end of it. And so I don't think I want to do as many as we did in 2022 going on a regular basis. We could probably fit in 5 to 10 more for the goals that we have each year. But then, personally, it's an ego thing. You look at me like, oh my gosh, that venue, they book 100 weddings. How come I'm not booking 100 weddings? But then I take a step back and I'm like, I don't want to do 100 weddings. I know I don't want 100 weddings. My staff probably doesn't want to do 100 weddings. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with where we are. You always want more, but then there's, what's the practical side of that? What comes with doing more? Do you really want that too?
Totally. How do you, so currently then you're under 100 weddings per year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When you're thinking about just estimating the finances, and really this is for anyone new who's coming in trying to think, okay, how am I going to do this? What are the financials of this? If I have to take a loan, what's my payoff look like? Things like that. If you were advising like a new venue owner, would you advise them to initially start with a higher price and a lower amount of weddings booked per year and kind of add the weddings on as they get more experience? Or would you say, try to get 60, 80, 100 weddings at a lower price to kind of get the reps in and then increase price and pull back on events later? Like, where do you stand in that?
There's pros and cons to either side for sure. I would probably lean more towards the side of maybe have a lower introductory price and get more people in, because the more people you have, the more voices you have to be singing your praises, to be giving you reviews, to get your name out there. So there is value in that. And some people, it does come down to price. And so if you are a lower price, maybe that's what appeals. Maybe that's what gets people in your doors when you need those people coming in to start having income in your business. Now, the flip side of that is not always, but sometimes people with lower budgets can be a little bit more demanding. They can be a little bit more work. They have high expectation. It's that champagne taste on a beer budget. So sometimes we've definitely run into people with sometimes those lower budgets have a little bit more of a headache. Do you want to be a DIY venue, or is that not your cup of tea? That's only a decision that you as the venue owner can make. I have seen that as we've raised our price over the years, it's kind of coming more in line with what our ideal client would be, what makes us happy to, different couples to work with. I just think we gel really well at the price point we're at for the couples that we're getting. We're not super high end, but we're not like a low budget factory kind of thing either. So you just, and some of it comes from experience and just going through it and saying, I do like that, and that I'm never doing again. So you learn a lot over the years too, to kind of find your happy place. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like maybe in your case, some of those things were the limits, and some of those lessons were kind of those pieces that you added on later, maybe locking the catering. You said you have a catering and planner list that people have to pick from. Were those kind of some of the things that you learned as you went along that you decided to do as a result of lessons learned?
Yeah, for sure. I would say the first thing was requiring a couple to have a planner. That definitely weeds out some people. They don't want to have a planner. It's not a part of their budget. Okay. I'm secure enough in our decision that I know that we might not be the right venue for you then. Luckily in our area, it's a pretty common thing, so we don't encounter that too often. Requiring professional vendors was a big thing. The catering was definitely an evolution, and that's less of a something on the couple. That's more of, we were getting caterers who just weren't respectful of our space. People whose team was constantly turning over, so there was never any venue knowledge, like that. It felt like we were kind of retraining them on our policies every time. And our list is pretty big. We've got about 20 caterers and 20 planners. So the couples have choices. I'm not saying here's your one person, here's your 3, your 5. They've got a lot of options, a lot of styles, price points, cuisines. So I feel like we're being very fair in that aspect.
Totally. People have the options they need, probably options they would be looking for anyway. It's just these ones happen to be ones that you vetted and you have experience with.
And the other thing that you'll find too is there can be that big name, whatever vendor. They're well respected. They work in all the big venue, or they just, they do a lot of work in your area. They're well known. They might not gel with you. They might not be a good fit for your space for any number of reasons. So there's a couple of vendors in our area, fortunately not many, but I know they'll do a lot of work at other venues, but they haven't been a good fit for us.
Fair, totally fair. I want to circle back to that question, and we can, conclude with this today, but I'm curious, you've been in business for a while. like I said, longer than a lot of the venues that I've talked to. And I'm curious kind of the evolution that you've seen the industry go through in terms of competition. That's something that I know venue owners are concerned about. Whether you're a new venue owner, whether you're, an incumbent in this industry, you've been around for a long time, you're looking at your competitors, you're looking at who's in the area, and you're wondering, how is this going to impact, my sales, my bottom line, the offerings that I have? How have you seen competition change in your area? And do you have some advice for people on how to handle some of the increased competition?
Competition has definitely increased over the years. I can tell you the street that we're on, there are 4 venues just on our street. Now it's a long road. It's probably 5-mile road, 5-mile long road, but there's 4 venues just on our street. We live in Northern Virginia wine country, so a lot of the wineries do weddings around us too. Because we're a little bit more rustic, there's a lot of rural part of our county, there's a lot of barns. So I'm stacked up against a lot of competition in my area that's only increasing. And like we talked about in the beginning, sometimes competition doesn't matter, because if you're not the right capacity, you were never a contender anyway. If you're a barn and somebody wants a manor house, well, you were never a contender anyway. So competition doesn't matter as much in that sense. But then you have to be constantly looking around. What is the industry doing? What do couples want? Can you be flexible on your policies? Do you need to change some of your policies? What's new that maybe you had never considered, or are you open to trying it? And then, like you said, also it's those soft skills. If somebody's coming around and saying, well, I'm going to 2-3 barns, and they're all the same kind of, they're all white barns. They all have prices that are in the similar range. They're all going to fit my capacity. What do your grounds look like? Is that a defining factor? Who's your staff? Some of these country clubs around us that do a lot of venues, it's just a constantly rotating door of people. So knowing that you have the experience to do what you do, that you're going to be their contact, you're going to see them through, that you don't have new people, every few months saying, oh, well, here's your coordinator now, and they have to relearn everything that you've already talked about to 3 other people. So I think it's just showing your value, showing your knowledge, what you can offer these couples, and that nobody's planned a wedding until you have to plan a wedding. And it's this big tidal wave that comes at these couples, and some of them get really stressed out. And I think they just want to be reassured that you've got their back, you're a resource, you're going to hold their hand, and you're not going to let their day fall apart because, ultimately we care about what they want. And, we don't want a bad review at the end of the day either too. That's always something that could always come up, I suppose. So that's kind of the approach that we take.
What I heard you saying there, which I think was powerful, is even though you might have a venue that's right next to you, if they're not serving the same target audience, like someone with a similar guest count, someone with a similar style, someone with a similar, some of these things, right? All inclusive versus more blank canvas, options, no options, things like that, that you're not, even though they're a competitor in terms of they sell a date for a wedding, they may not really be your direct competitors. And so you don't need to be scared or worried about that. And the ones that are similar to you, it sounds like you were saying you can stand out in terms of how you treat them, the experience they have when they come in the door, things like that. Was that accurate?
Yes. And even if somebody is not what you would consider a direct competitor, I think you can always be learning from them. If somebody is a much more high-end, fancier, whatever venue than you may be, why do you think that's what they are? Is it their style of space, or is it the service that they offer? Is it how they treat their couples? Is it just the budgets that somebody has? Like, if you were to look into how they are running their business or what they offer their couple, you may be able to incorporate some of those things that can help your venue stand out and be different too. Or maybe you take your own spin on it. Not to say that you want to be out there copying your other vendors or your other venues. You definitely don't want to rip them off and try and do something that they're already specialized in. But sometimes it just gets your mind turning, and you come up with something new that you want to try out for yourself.
How much does an area's population play into effect?
I don't know. I only know my setting. I don't know if you know Kinsey Roberts out in Colorado. We're friendly, and she's 3 hours outside of Denver, so she's much more of a destination. She's always got people coming into her venue. Where I am outside of Washington, D.C., we're a very populous county. We have a lot of young professionals. They are getting married. So to us, if you're not from our county, we are getting a lot of couples from Washington, D.C. itself. The city right outside is Alexandria and Arlington, a very urban type area. And they don't want that wedding. They don't want the hotel ballroom. They don't want the downtown wedding. So they're coming out to our county because we are a little bit more relaxed, rustic. I keep saying rustic. It's not rustic, just a little bit more rural, a lot more green, suburban type area. So to us, that's, we're getting people from the city. They're coming out to us, but that's only, 45 minutes, an hour. We're not in the middle of, completely remote location too. So I don't know how other people attract or get those couples out to them. But I will also say that our area that couples are looking at is so wide. Where we are outside of DC, people will go out to the shore, which is 2 or 3 hours from here. They'll go down to Charlottesville, which is about 3 hours from here. They'll go out west towards the mountain a couple hours. So I am always amazed at the radius of area that some of our couples are looking at. So it's not just who's my competition down the street, the next county. Where we are, people are looking really vastly wide.
That is so interesting. These are questions that I wrestle with all the time because, you talk to venue owners in different parts of the country and different markets are different. Some markets are more destination focused. Some are highly, localized where there's just such a population density that they're able to kind of work with the income and the revenue that they're receiving from like the local residents. So that's really interesting. I want to wrap up today just talking about marketing. How do you market your venue and kind of get the word out to all these people that we're talking about in the area?
Yeah, I suppose we've been pretty lucky. We've never done any kind of paid advertising. We got in with the Knot and the Wedding Wire early enough back when they were doing free listings. So we still have that. I use that mainly as like review sites. We get a few inquiries, from them. Actually, we get more than a few. We get a good number of inquiries for them, just however their algorithms work. We don't tend to book a lot from there. Most of our, because I'll always ask couples how they find us. A lot of couples just find us through Google online searches. We do put a lot of effort into our website, our SEO. We do try and blog. I know blogs are kind of not as popular anymore, but at least in terms of Google, it's giving us some Google juice there. As a venue, unfortunately, we don't get a lot of referrals from other vendors. We're kind of the top of the food chain. We will have some planners give us bring business to us, but it's not a significant part of our business. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of repeat business because your sister doesn't want to get married at the same place as the brother did, and even your best friend doesn't want to get married where you did. So we don't have a whole lot of repeat business, which is a very unique aspect to owning a venue. But I would say our top source is definitely our online presence.
Got it. Websites,
social media. And actually, I see a lot of people say, we do Facebook ads. We pull in a lot of our business comes from Facebook or Instagram. I'm not booking off of social media. I think Facebook is where the parents go because they want to see, that's what they look at. So the parent, my daughter just booked this place. Let me go look them up on Facebook. Our couples go to Instagram less to book us. We get some inquiries from there, but I think it's less booking and it's more of, okay, well, now I've booked you. I want to see the inspiration. What have other couples done? What are you posting there? We've stuck our toe into the whole TikTok thing. I don't keep up with that as much. So that's kind of fallen off our efforts. But that's kind of how we see social media in our business.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for sharing about, your experience in business, your process of building your venue, renovating your venue, the winery, the B&B that you're, bringing on board. It's not fully done yet, the B&B, correct?
So technically we are already a B&B. I just never have availability. It's not something I promote. That's a whole, like you said, it's a whole other can of worms. I don't really want to get into overnights quite yet. Honestly, it came down to be a zoning decision. Going back to zoning, it allowed us to do some more events than we had been doing. So our main farmhouse is a bed and breakfast. The second house that we're just finishing renovations, that hasn't gone through that process yet.
Got it. Understood. Well, very cool. For anyone who's listening, who, on YouTube, we'll put all the descriptions, links to all of your, everything, Instagram, the website and all of that. Where is the best place to contact you if they're either looking at your venue to get married or they want to just kind of learn more about you and your venue, maybe even ask you further questions? What's the best place to reach out to you?
Email's always the best way. hello@48fields.com. 48fields.com is our website if anybody wants to check us out. If you do see us on social, it's 48 Fields.
I love that. And I would highly recommend check out the website. It's a beautiful page with those arched, kind of vaulted wooden beams, and just it's a beautiful, beautiful venue. So huge congratulations and thanks again for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. No, thank you for having me. I appreciate being here, and I could talk weddings and venue stuff for hours. So this has been great.
It's true. Me too. Well, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you.